Oh, hey. Hi, my name is Hannah, and this is Pepper and Pine. And I have a couple of things I want to share with you about our homeschool journey. Things that I know now that I didn't know then, things I know about myself now that were always there, but now that I know what they are, I can see how they impacted our homeschool journey. I love the temperaments. I love exploring them. I love understanding them. I like to type people in their temperaments. And I have about a 50-50 success rate in being able to identify the temperaments in other people. But understanding the temperaments helps me understand myself more than understanding my children. And when I first started homeschooling, I was really into finding out what my child was like, what was his learning style, what was his temperament. And in all of that, I was consumed with focusing on my child, and I lost track of who I was in the mix. After some time, I realized I am a particular temperament. I am a particular teacher. I am a particular person. And all of that particularness informed decisions when I didn't even realize it. The first decision it informed was our decision to homeschool. I didn't realize that I homeschooled because of my temperament and my personality and my capabilities. I homeschooled because I thought that I could take on the challenges of homeschool better than I could take on the challenges associated with sending my child to public school. And that was for two reasons. One was the reason that I was homeschooling my student. It was for religious reasons and for pedagogical reasons. So for those two reasons, I felt like I was better equipped to deal with those challenges in a home setting. The pedagogical choices were that we wanted to do a Waldorf curriculum. And religiously, we wanted to include our religious studies into our schooling. But I didn't want to send my child to a religious school, and I did not want to send my child to a Waldorf school. So, as there are no Waldorf Islamic schools, I decided to homeschool with those two goals in mind. But there were other reasons why I decided to homeschool rather than send my child to school. I thought that I would have a harder time if my child was going to public school, constantly telling my child no for things that he couldn't do if it didn't align with our family values. And I didn't feel so capable in dealing with that kind of conflict on a daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal, yearly basis. I felt like if I had more control in creating an environment that was a yes environment with things and people and activities that did align with our values, I would have an easier time in that respect, and I would take on the challenges associated with the homeschool process. Well, that was only one thing that was dictated by my personality or my temperament. The other thing that actually had longer lasting effects all the way into adulthood was that I taught them according to my temperament, the good things about my temperament and the challenging things about my temperament. My temperament is primarily phlegmatic and secondarily choleric, which I really argued against. And then probably a little bit of sanguine is mixed in there on occasion when I feel pretty confident. And I don't really feel melancholic, but I have to say that after a few quite challenging, sad life experiences, I certainly tapped into some qualities of the melancholic. Now, understanding my temperament came as a whole process much later in our homeschool journey. However, that temperament certainly informed much of how I homeschooled. Now, our temperaments are generally set, but the whole point is that we are all four temperaments, and we do want to find harmony and balance between all four of them. We also have different stages in our life. Childhood is usually marked by a sanguine time, followed by a choleric time. There's some nuances in between, usually transitions like puberty or menopause or even having a child. Those transitions sometimes are filled with a little bit of melancholy as you grieve one part of your life as you transition into a new part of your life. And generally, those are associated to developmental stages more so than life events. Then after your striving for achievement in your youth, you start to slow down with a phlegmatic time period and a melancholic time period. So we are also within these higher developmental stages of development that are marked by temperaments. We also have our life experiences and our stresses that are sometimes informing how we behave even within our temperament. Now, my temperament certainly loves to avoid conflict, my main temperament. My second temperament, the choleric temperament, actually kind of embraces conflict, but I did not have the energy for that part of my temperament while I was in the trenches of motherhood. So I was mostly at the mercy of my phlegmatic temperament, but my choleric side certainly helped me reach certain achievements, certain goals within our homeschooling journey. The phlegmatic temperament doesn't generally like conflict. And so how that looked in our homeschool was, and even in my parenting, even early on, looked like this. For instance, I'm with my child at the park and he's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. And we've been there for 2 hours and I say, "Oh, it's time to go home." And my child says, "I want to stay longer." I would say, "Okay, we can stay longer." The time to leave was kind of arbitrary and he wants to stay longer, so I will stay longer. The only times that wasn't okay was if there was something really pressing that we had to do, and I really didn't like having to succumb to those deadlines. So often I would try to make sure that in anything that we didn't have to be pressured by those deadlines. However, we still had them if my students were in classes or extracurricular activities, or we were meeting friends for a play date, for instance. We still had those deadlines and those caused a lot of stress. Then in school, suppose it's time to start school, but my children are playing. Well, I don't want to introduce conflict to that. And that's going to be harder for me to pull them away from playing in order to go do some schoolwork. And really, their play is more important and more productive and better for their development than any school that I could bring, so I would let them play. So I was avoiding that conflict because I rationalized that it was usually better for them, and I didn't really like engaging in conflict with children, or really with anyone, but with children I felt like they know intuitively what's right for them if they're in an environment that is wholesome. So if they're in an environment that's wholesome, that we didn't have any screen time or media time or TV time, we avoided a lot of things that maybe were closed-ended play or not really wholesome for them, in my opinion. All of these things were in my opinion. Then the environment that they were left with was wholesome and having their own self-direction to enjoy that time, that play time. I felt like it was good for them and I didn't want to pull them away from that. But that continued year after year. And the only times that I would actually be more strict about what we were doing was after long periods of time of letting them do what they wanted to do. The anxiety would build up where I would end up being really strict about getting our work done because we had spent so much of the week playing that by Thursday or Friday, I was a little stressed to get our work done. And then I was less flexible, less compassionate, and not really listening to my children's needs in that moment versus carefully cultivating rhythm and routine with more structure to help them have a routine that was good for them and good for me. This temperament persisted until my children were well into junior high and even high school. And that's a really big problem, especially post-puberty when children are old enough to recognize these shortcomings and also at a period in their life, post-puberty, where they really need that structure in the environment to help them with their own self-discipline on their road to independence and freedom. So me providing too much flexibility and too much avoidance of conflict and really letting them take their time to finish a task rather than ushering them along to the next task or next lesson, that shortcoming on my part then translated into them not having the self-discipline that other peers might have had better developed in a more structured environment. Now, nothing we do usually has long-term detrimental effects. Like a lot of these things we can overcome and learn from them. They're not the end-all be-all. So what I found was that once they were in a college environment at around 14, 15, or 16 years old, dual enrollment with their homeschool, and then eventually full-time college students, they certainly got that structure then. And all of the things that we weren't pushing academically, they had the chance to really rise to that challenge after their homeschool experience without having the burnout that some students might have experienced in a traditional brick and mortar experience, school experience. So that it was all novel to them. Studying for an exam was novel. Turning in homework was novel. Taking a test, taking a quiz, going to class, having to sit in class for an entire duration of a class. It didn't take them long to acclimate to that environment, barely a semester, probably less. So it was fine in the end, but the problem isn't just that they were able to overcome it. I didn't overcome it. And they are able to see that as adults. And in the period of time between 14 to 21, approximately that 7-year cycle, children are very attuned to qualities that are, in their opinion, good and qualities that, in their opinion, are bad. So seeing the quality of having more flexibility, and I'm actually, it's curious that they see this because it doesn't feel that way all the time on my part, but in comparison to other individuals or their classroom or their work environment, they see this kind of flexibility and they interpret it as not a positive quality. They interpret it as maybe more of a negative quality. So therein lies still my work to do in order to work on the part of my temperament that is less structured and more go with the flow. And it's not to say that there aren't good qualities with go with the flow. For sure there are. And also our home personalities, or sometimes the things that we do that are not so polished when we're at home, are not necessarily the way that we behave when we're in a classroom setting or when we're in a work environment or when we're within our community. So these are personal developments that when I see them, I recognize how they have affected my parenting experience and my homeschool journey. I hope you'll check out the blog post that accompanies this video where I share more information on the temperaments. You can find the link to that blog post in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on my website at pepperandpine.com.